Welcome to another Rural Realities podcast, presented by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection.
Welcome to the Rural Realities podcast, where we talk honestly about the challenges facing farm families and our rural communities. We share tools and resources to help navigate family farming. I'm your host, Karen Endress, Farmer Wellness Program Coordinator for the Wisconsin Farm Center at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. I've spent over 30 years working in Wisconsin agriculture as a farm owner, a communications professional. I'm also a mom, a coach, and an advocate for wellness for our farm families and rural communities. On Rural Realities, we know that family farming is more than a business. It's a way of life. And with that comes unique pressures, especially when it comes to family relationships, finances, and planning for our futures. And I know that firsthand being involved in a multi-generational family dairy operation. Today we're talking about one of the most emotional and complex and stressful topics in agriculture, family farm transitions, and how stress can build when expectations, communication, and financial realities are not aligned. Our guest today has lived this reality firsthand and now helps farm families across the country navigate it with greater clarity and confidence. Jace Young is the founder of Legacy Farmer, a coaching and financial education platform focused on helping farmers protect their operations and redefine what legacy really means. Jace, welcome to Rural Realities. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Karen, it's great to be here, and I appreciate the invite, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Great. Well, Jace, you grew up on a multi-generational family farm in Kansas. If I understand, it was cattle, grain, and a feed yard. And from the outside, it sounds like everything looked like it was a really successful operation. But behind the scenes, things were maybe unraveling a little bit. Can you share what happened and how that experience has shaped you and what you're doing today?
Yeah, so my granddad started our feed yard specifically back in the 1950s. So my granddad had a pretty tough childhood. He grew up in the dirty 30s in Kansas and that type of stuff there as well. So he just had it kind of tough, coming up to that time period in his life. But he started the farm operation back in the 50s and built it to where it was a $10 million plus operation. Our feed yard held 14,000 head of cattle. That's what I grew up working on all the time. And then we had 3 to 5,000 acres of ground, and then a grain elevator facility. So it was a big operation for a small community. And I know everybody listening to the show understands exactly what I mean there. So my granddad built it up. He had a lot of success for about 50 years, 40, 50 years there that he was extremely successful, made good money, built it from literally starting out with a $15,000 loan into a multi-million-dollar operation there that not only just supported, him and my grandma, but their 5 kids and their families as well, right? And so it was a massive operation, a lot of different moving pieces and things like that. But unfortunately, yeah, things went sideways when we got into the early 2000s. Local markets became global markets pretty quickly with the internet age and that type of stuff. There's a lot more volatility in prices, and the game just changed overall. And my granddad, honestly, he just wasn't ready for it, wasn't prepared for it. And there was a lot of people that got taken out during that time. But you think about it, this was a guy that made it through the 80s, survived the 80s with high interest rates and that type of stuff. And then to get taken out, in 2005 is when everything kind of came to a head there. But yeah, to your point, though, from the outside looking in, looked like a massively successful operation because it was for a lot of years. I grew up kind of like I would call it a spoiled farm kid because, had the dirt bike, the go-karts, the four-wheelers, all that type of stuff that was important back then,
Nice.
right? But to the outside looking in, it's like, man, we have everything. Parents had a nice house, big operation, cattle trucks coming in and out all day, that type of stuff there. But yeah, unfortunately, things went sideways and kind of started to begin in 2004. And my granddad lost a lot of money one year. And then the next year, basically lost the same amount of money, and that was it, right? So 50 years of hard work. I was going to be the third generation on the operation, and tens of millions of dollars in revenue all amounts to nothing, and essentially what seemed like a 6-month period is all.
Were some of his children also like your parents? They were all working on the farm?
Oh yeah, everybody lived out there, right? So it was the true family farm operation that you can think of. My granddad was very old school in his mentality in that he expected his kids to come back, right? Like it was their obligation to come back and carry on that family legacy. So my parents literally, they got married when they were 17 and 15. I got pregnant with my brother 3 months later. Literally, my dad graduated high school at 16 or 17, and they lived on the feed yard. And that was my dad's passion. My two uncles ran all the farm ground. My two aunts worked in the office, kind of managing all the finances on the back end. And yeah, they never left Tribune, Kansas. Never left the farm operation.
So as you look back on that growing up, how do you feel that like the roles were defined? Because you had a lot of people coming in to work on the farm. So was there good definition in roles and what people were doing?
No, and honestly, there's one quote I always go back to. It's that a majority of success is in learning what not to do versus learning what to do. And the reason I say that is because I learned a lot about what not to do with my granddad. Um, but also too, me starting my own business, having to start from nothing and everything like that. The further I get into building Legacy Farmer, the more I understand why he was the way he was and what things kind of shaped his viewpoint on running the business. But when it came to roles and responsibilities across the operation, it was, I'll kind of put it the nice way, it was half-ass, right? So my granddad wanted to empower his kids, but then he also wanted to be able to walk out to the feed yard where my dad was leading a team of 15 people there. They all lived on the feed yard as well. And my dad would get everybody squared away at 4 or 5 in the morning to get feed trucks and everything going for the day and just know what the plan was for the day with cattle coming in, cattle going out, that type of stuff. And then my granddad would show up at noon or 2 p.m. and change everything. Right. So that caused a lot of problems, right? You're basically fake empowering your kids to be leaders inside the operation and then ripping that power away from them. And, in today's business term, that's what we call end running. And that's what we talk a lot about with our operations that we work with in Legacy Farmer that have multiple team members and multiple family members back.
Right. Because I see it too with a lot of the farms that we work with at the Wisconsin Farm Center or within my own personal experience in farming. We learn to manage from the generation before us,
Yeah.
but the operations were a lot different, right?
Yeah.
The operation they grew up in was a lot different and a lot of different experiences. And plus, things change in the world. And new technologies and new ways to manage and all of this. And so it's you run into with these two generations just a very different way of how they believe they should manage, managing all those people, right? It sounds like your dad was a really good, I like to say duck rower communicator,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
he
sure.
was out there, like you explained, getting everything ready for the day. What was the plan? Communicating to his team, but then to have someone come in and change that
Yeah.
is just really hard. And it's one of those things that how do we teach farmers about management and management styles and what works in today's modern times?
Yeah, and I go back to even an old saying there that one of my mentors told me about 10 years ago, and it's pretty simple. It's let go to grow, right? So every farm operation that I know today, anybody that's in it, they want to grow their operation. But the thing is, though, is in order to grow the operation, you have to evolve as a leader as well. And my granddad really struggled with that, which again, going back to seeing his childhood, the roughness of it and the tough times that he went through, I can totally see why he had that need to control everything because he wanted to ultimately, make sure that everybody was taken care of in the end, because he probably went through a time. I remember my granddad telling me about stories back in the dirty 30s and everything there, where his parents would leave and a storm would come in. They wouldn't see them for 2 or 3 days, and they were just little kids at the house, And so I can see those things, right, and why he had the need for control as well. But at the same time, though, too, the need for control and people wanting to micromanage their team and that type of stuff there as well, it just destroys trust, it destroys communication, it destroys any chance or possibility of you growing the operation into what it's capable of becoming.
That is a really great quote. I need to write that one down because that's really important as we work with farmers and talk through that. It's as you're growing, right? You are still controlling. It's just in a different way than what
Yeah.
we were taught. So your whole story really, it just really resonates with me, and it stands out too that I can't imagine how much it was. Yes, it was a huge financial loss, not
Mm-hmm.
only for your family but for your community. But it
Mm-hmm.
really is a lot more than that. When you go through financial challenges or a farm goes through a bankruptcy or even someone just deciding they no longer want to farm and they want to do something else, families, it's more than that, right? We need to get into this discussion about
Yeah.
legacy, right? Because we all hear that growing up. And we all define ourselves a little bit too about the legacy, but the legacy is a lot more than the land, the buildings, the net worth, isn't it? How do you define legacy today?
Yeah, so to me, legacy means leaving the next generation with an opportunity, right? And by that, I mean that could be an opportunity carrying on the family farm operation. That could be an opportunity in some completely different type of business, right? So there's so many more ways to make money and create a lifestyle in today's world than there was back in the 70s or 80s, even, right? Or even back in the early 2000s. It's just the world has changed so much there. And so the thing is, like with so many people, and the problem with trying to leave a legacy that is just land or assets or just things of monetary value there, you're unfortunately what we've seen over the years working with hundreds of these family farm operations is there's this entitlement that gets built by your kids, right? And we've seen so many operations go under because it's this typical scenario, right? They may have 3 or 4 kids, one came back to work on the operation, the other 3 move away, go choose a different lifestyle, but they have this entitlement that they still want their share of the operation, that it's theirs. That's a really tough thing here, right? And that's why I say I want to leave them an opportunity, not necessarily assets, because the sure and guaranteed way to destroy years of work, and my granddad would have done this as well, is to split up the operation and all of the assets evenly between all those kids. And we've seen it time and time again. The number of people that have come to Legacy Farmer that are in year 5 through 10 of lawsuits with their siblings or now in business with their second or third cousins because of decisions that were made 50 to 70 years ago. Right. So there's compounding consequences for not doing this the right way and not setting things up here because, yeah, even with me and my siblings, yeah, do we get along fine? Yes. Would we get along fine when it comes to business? Absolutely not. And so when you think about splitting up the operation evenly, yeah, you're essentially creating 4 business partners in one operation, which does not work out well.
No, that's right. And I think just working with farmers again and being in a farm, this shift of what you're talking about is so important that we get there. But it's a big uphill battle, right? Trying to educate people. So how do you, when you sit down with a new client, a new farm comes to you, they're in the midst of transition, they're trying to figure out between generations, they're just really not knowing what they're not getting along in the discussions. Maybe they have different visions for the business.
Yep.
Where do you start?
And see, so that's where things from a tactical standpoint, it's really easy to get this done. It's the emotional challenges that cause all the problems, right? Because business overall is pretty easy. People inside the business are what make business tough, right? You know what I mean there.
Right.
So that's one of the toughest things here is when somebody does come in, the first and foremost thing that we're doing is helping them get structured and organized financially. Most people do not know that, and they're trying to have conversations around passing on an operation to the next generation. They don't even know where they're at financially today, so they don't even know numbers wise and financial wise what they have to pass on. So that's the first step that we're taking to help people get structured there. And then once we get some of that structure and organization, now we can start entertaining these ideas and scenarios around passing on the operation and maybe what it looks like around passing on a certain amount of assets to this kid or that kid or whatever that is there. And a lot of the problems that people have run into over the years is they're trying to have these conversations, like you just said there. Kids are getting irritated, but there's a lack of clarity in finances where you can't even talk to the kids intelligently because you don't know where you're at financially or what you could even offer them. You're just talking about it from a high level, and then you let people's emotions fill that room and all these ideas and stories around, oh, well, mom and dad, this kid is their favorite, or they don't love me that much, or whatever, right? Who knows what's going to happen, right? But the emotions do carry a lot of challenges there, and it just creates this environment where nobody's going to get along. And then all of a sudden, mom and dad, if the first discussion is bad, they're going to avoid that conversation now for the next 10 or 20 years. And most of the time, they're not going to have it at all. And they just let the kids deal with the aftermath.
Yes, we see that very often where we have some parents that come in and they're in their 80s.
Yep.
The next generation is in their 50s and they haven't made that transition of business yet. And you have, maybe a sibling working full time on the farm. Sometimes you have people coming in that help out part time. And then you have, the scenario where you don't have the sibling on the farm at all. But like you're saying, now parents are older and very few years left, and they don't want that conflict. They don't want to deal with that. But if they don't, what they're going to leave behind is a broken family because they can't manage that decision on their own.
And then too, their legacy is tainted. When their kids think about their parents passing on, they think immediately about maybe the lawsuits that they're in, right? Or that they don't have a relationship with any of their siblings anymore, that the farm operation, the one thing we want to create to keep the family together is actually the one thing that destroyed the entire family and tore it all apart. And so as a parent, and that's where I go back to kind of the cost of leadership with our members and everything there as well. Because as a leader, you are, when it comes to making decisions, the biggest challenge is there are going to be decisions that you have to make that hurt people that you love unintentionally, right? It's not your intention to hurt them, but sometimes in business and life, we have to make hard decisions that are going to negatively impact the lives of people we care about around us. Then part two of that is you're going to be misunderstood. And part three of that is you are going to be disliked. This is the cost of leadership. And that's why when it comes to building the farm operation, you have to get okay emotionally with living with that and doing what is required today, so that, because when, like you said, when you're 85, 95, you're not wanting to do that. You're wanting to enjoy your final years with your kids and that type of stuff there, not have them resent you. So either take your medicine now or deal with the pain later.
Yeah, I love that. So in this approach to kind of redefine legacy, how does that help reduce the stress during transition, or how does that bring up a healthier conversation?
Yeah, so I think too, with like a lot of people, how when somebody has a crucial conversation that they've been avoiding for a long time, right? Or they make a big decision that they know they need to have made, but they avoid it for a long time. A lot of people, and I've experienced this all the time as well, you feel this weight lifted off your shoulders. Well, that tells you is the right decision to make, right? So if you want to remove that weight, remove that stress, remove that burden, you have to grow up and be the leader inside of the operation. Be okay with being misunderstood, being disliked, and making hard decisions that are going to negatively impact people that you may love or care about. Being okay with that, because in doing it today, you are going to save yourself years of heartache down the road. And also, too, give your kids time to plan their futures as well. Imagine being in your 80s or 90s and you have 2 or 3 kids that are back in the operation in their 50s now, they still have no idea what they're getting. And then guess what? Because you have avoided telling them this or even transitioning the assets earlier in life, you've robbed them of their business, their development as a business owner, and the mindsets and skill sets that are demanded in today's economic environment to actually carry and steward that wealth. So there's so many compounding consequences here.
So many. I mean, as you're talking, I'm running through all these situations of people in my life or people that I've come across through the Wisconsin Farm Center of exactly that. And I was thinking of a few of them in their 50s and not knowing what part of the farm they're going to own.
Yep.
If they're going to have to fight their siblings to get that ownership. I mean, in your 50s, you have to know what your retirement is looking like, right? I mean, I know farmers say they never retire, but in reality, you have to know what kind of income that you're going to need when you do want to take a step back. Or how do you then, if you're in your 50s, you probably have children that are close to or going to be young adults. And what if they want to farm? You don't even know how to bring them into the business. So it gets really confusing.
Well, and also too, if you have a few kids that are coming back, the revenue for the operation, you already know this, Karen, has to double, if not triple, in order to support more families coming back. The cost of living today versus 50 years ago, obviously dramatically different there. And a lot of people, that's why we have to plan for this, because now just the first generation has 3 or 4 kids coming back, and then the third generation is going to have how many? Right. So now an operation that was started to handle one family's, income is now responsible for 10 plus.
Right.
So that's why these plans and these discussions need to be had as early as you possibly can, so that people can plan accordingly for their future.
And I like to call it sometimes on our farms like the widening of the family tree.
Yep.
Right. It was a parent handing down to maybe a couple of children or one child. But then as the next generation, it keeps getting wider and wider. And then you talk about leadership and how to be a leader. But even when maybe it's with your cousins or an aunt or an uncle, it gets a little dicey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's where I talk about it's the price of leadership. Right. And the price of leadership is a lot more heavy when you're dealing and working with family members. than it is. It's already heavy when you're just working with general people or employees or team members that maybe are live in the same communities that you do, that you have to see every now and then. It's 10 times harder when you're dealing with family and you have to be the a-hole to your family and do what needs to be done for the future generations inside the operation as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I think as I look at leaders, right, and I've had this conversation with people I've tried to educate about agriculture, and they're like, the one thing we didn't realize is you don't really get to be off of work because maybe an employee lives with you, maybe, you have to go to dinner or to a holiday with, a business partner, or maybe someone you're their supervisor. I mean, all of that gets a little gray and fuzzy and blurred lines. And like you said, that the true leader in the operation or the leaders, it's really stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not a fun journey. It's not an easy journey to go down. But the thing is, though, is that tough journey and doing what's required today that builds the person that is going to successfully pass on the operation to the next generation. And I truthfully mean that. And to a lot of people, again, I'm not saying all leaders have to be, a-holes or anything like that. But what I am saying is they have to be okay with being perceived that way, knowing that deep down they're doing what they feel is best to leave behind an opportunity for future generations. Right.
Right.
Nothing they're doing today is out of spite or because they don't like their family or anything like that. It's literally because they're trying to do what they can to leave the next generations an opportunity here.
Right. And I like what you talked about with, making that decision to give that next generation time.
Mhm.
Time to go about and maybe say, hey, I am going to pursue something different or a different route in agriculture or something totally different because these decisions have been made. So you're really giving them a gift
Yeah.
to say, go do what you choose to do. And if you want to farm, you will find a way. Maybe it's not on this particular piece of land or in these buildings or with this, in the dairy industry, it's all about prefix genetics. Like maybe it's not here, but we're giving you an opportunity at an early age to go figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, and the thing is too, and this is what I always tell a lot of our members and stuff as well, is when they're trying to figure out how do I build my kids into the type of people that can be the leaders in the operation and truly run this thing. I always say it very simply. I'm like, make them go start their own business. There's plenty of opportunity out there. There's endless amounts of opportunity out there. And the ability to grow a business today is so much easier than what it was 20 to 50 years ago. But force them to do that, not because you're trying to push them out of the operation, but because you're trying to give them skill sets as a business owner and ways of thinking and developing that business IQ that can only be learned through experiences, not theory taught in a classroom. And you know what I mean there. So
Right.
that's a huge thing because even if I had a son or daughter that came back to the business and one of them was an employee for 30 years, the other one said, "Hey, Dad, I want to go build my own thing, but I may want to come back in the future," and they went and built their own business for 30 years. Who do you think I'm passing the operation on to?
Exactly. And, but you're going to make that tough decision and there's going to
Exactly.
be some feelings hurt, right? Because, hey, I was here working and
Mhm.
helping you in the operation, but the other one went off and learned
Yeah.
management skills and leadership.
And this is why with even even when I was in the bank and that type of stuff, right? So there's a lot of these institutions here, especially in the Midwest, and just kind of have this old school way of thinking that, oh, the people that are here the longest, they know the most, or they get the most money, or they get the best titles, or whatever that is. I don't look at a business that way, right? I'm looking for the amount of value that people can provide. And if you have a son or daughter that stays in the operation as an employee, just because your presence was here and you were working as an employee does not mean you deserve this either, right? If you had a brother or sister that went off on their own, built their own business, completely blew you away when it comes to learning about business, thinking about business in a certain way, literally experiencing every seat that it takes to grow a business. And that's why, like, even with our farm operation, Karen, I tell a lot of people this, I'm so grateful it went under because I don't know who I would be right now if I would have went back to the operation as third generation and not gotten to experience what it took to grow it from zero to that level. Right. Because I have a lot different level of appreciation and respect for what I built. But also, too, every seat in Legacy Farmer, from marketing to sales to operations to finance to software development to product development, all these, I've had to live in every seat. right? So think about the
Right.
business knowledge and IQ that I've had to develop the hard way, and I'm so grateful for it. And it was hell. There was times where it was really challenging. I'm so grateful for that though, because that built me into a very, well-rounded business owner now, where I'm at today.
That's awesome. And I think there's so many good messages in that that I just want to reemphasize with our listeners today that it is different because historically, like you said, when our grandparents went into a company or went into a business, right? And you worked, I know my dad worked for the local phone company from the time he was 17 years old.
Yep.
And he just, you expected, right? Because of your sweat equity,
Yep.
that you would be promoted throughout
Mhm.
that career if you stayed loyal
Yep.
and
Yep.
not about what skills you were developing. I mean, I think our larger companies take great pride in, leadership tracks, or you see when a young adult goes into a company, they might move the person every couple of years if they want to develop them into a leader to
Yep.
put them in different parts of the business. And we need to think that way in agriculture as well and in our farms because it is a lot more complex. I know you talk about helping families first get their arms around their finances. And I always talk about the stress of managing these businesses today.
Yep.
It's great. We do have a lot of new tools out there to help, right, with some of our risk. And we have tools out there to budget. We have so many more tool management tools across all areas of agriculture, right? Even our precision agriculture in our fields to get better yields, more exact, spend less, right?
Yep.
But all that takes a management. I mean, you have to learn
Yep.
and you have to learn how to manage all those tools, and that's really stressful.
Well, and you have to be willing to, and that's why the kids that will choose to go build their own business, what's great about this is even with, I talked about all the different departments that I've had to live in just in Legacy Farmer. Karen, I sat in each one of those departments for 2 to 3 years minimum. Over the past decade, I left the banking industry in 2016. So over the past decade, I have had to spend time in each one of those departments. And that's the thing is a lot of people, they want to skip that process, right? They want to skip those periods of growth in their life. But the thing is, the people that do skip ahead, they end up falling back down anyway, right? And so I always push our members to make sure that their kids are spending time in each side of the business. And two, also, the other big issue we have with passing on and transitioning the farm operation is you have to figure out a way to pass on the understanding and the respect for the assets that the generation is receiving, is inheriting. You know what I mean? And the reason I say that is because we have a lot of third, fourth, and fifth generation operations that have come to Legacy Farm over the years. And we go back through and we start asking them questions around decisions they've made over the past 5 or 10 years. The number of years where they say, well, yeah, I lost 300 grand this year, 500 that year, 600 that year, and their equity on their balance sheet is getting eaten up, kind of, because if they have a lot of real estate, obviously appreciation in real estate values the past 10 years gives them this false sense of growth and success, which is a whole another issue. But
Right.
they go through, they lose $500,000 in one year, and the bank says, well, yeah, let's just restructure it. We'll just term it out. We'll renew your operating line of credit. You're good to go. So, and they're like, oh, what's the deal? Your great grandparents sacrificed 20 to 30 years of their life to earn that $500,000 in equity that you just carelessly refinanced. And emotionally, it's like it's no big deal to you. And that's why I say I'm so grateful that our operation went under, because the level of respect that I have for what I've had to build from literally nothing, a negative net worth. It's just that has to be experienced, right? It can't be told. It can't be taught in the classroom. That has to be experienced there. And so that's why pushing the kids to go build their own business and that type of stuff, those are the lessons that you're instilling into them that will give them a level of respect when it comes to stewarding that legacy in the future generations as well.
Well, and from what I hear in it too, um, creating resiliency, right?
Absolutely.
And how to go through those challenging times. It's so important that we do that. And you talk about the land, and that is a really tough thing in agriculture with how much it has appreciated over, especially in rapid fire the last decade.
Yep.
And how does that younger generation, if they look back in history and they want to farm like the generations before them and they think they need to, right, they may not own all their land, they may have a different business model, but it's being that flexible and to adapt. And that's challenging though. I mean, it's hard to think about that. Because that's when you go back again to the start of our discussion, what does legacy mean? And is that the assets? And how you define it as the opportunity, which is a really fresh way of looking at that.
Yeah, and the thing is that too is like the assets there, right? So, man, instead of giving kids and allowing them to take over, all the real estate or something like that, inherit all the real estate and things, I would rather say, hey, what business do you want to start? Do you want to get into farming? We will back a loan for you or something like that versus giving you a multi-million-dollar asset. And when I say back a loan, I'm not saying backing a $500,000 or $1 million loan like a lot of families are doing today with 19 and 20-year-old kids coming back to the operation. You are setting those kids up for failure. For them to come back and immediately have signature over advancing $500,000 or $1 million on an operating line without knowing what the heck they're doing, you're setting them up for failure. But giving kids an opportunity to say, hey, if you want to start your own business, then from my assets, we will loan you 150 grand. And here are the stipulations on when things have to be done, how many years you have to pay it back, and that type of stuff there as well. Give them an opportunity. I'm not giving them immediate success. I'm not, because that's a sure way to piss away an entire generation of work there. I'm going to give them an opportunity.
That's awesome. And as we go back in our discussion before, you were talking about really the first step is having people understand their finances.
Yeah.
How does financial clarity or lack of it really affect stress and well-being on the farm?
Yeah, so we talked about, a little bit earlier about the weight being lifted off your shoulders. So many people, when they come into Legacy Farmer, within the first 2 weeks of just getting basic structure and organization in place, we're already experiencing that weight, right? Getting lifted. And so much of the stress that we have today is because there's some unknown question that we have in our mind that keeps rattling around in our brain and keeping us staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Right? And why we're so restless and why we just feel like we have to go work harder because that's our only escape to not think about that unknown there. Versus when you know what the numbers are, okay, great. So now we have a plan. And so a lot of people, that's kind of a saying that we have with new customers coming into Legacy Farmer. It's never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is, right? But the thing is, we have to know what our starting point is so we can build, off of that, right? So many people too. And we experience scarcity throughout the year, right? When we get into harvest or something like that, money's just going out the door, right? And so many people, they get stressed, scarcity starts creeping in. They're like, well, what should I do? When was the last time you updated their numbers? 2 months ago. Okay, great. Go update your numbers. Just go through the exercise of updating the numbers. And that way it's positioned in your mind, it's cemented in your mind from the work you did that, hey, it's not as bad as what my mind is telling me. I can go to sleep tonight. It's okay.
Right. I mean, that's kind of an old saying is information is power, right? And it gives us the power to think clearly, to make decisions. Agriculture is stressful. There's no doubt about it. And it's become even more stressful, I think, as we've layered on a lot of tools and things, but as things have appreciated and the values of these businesses have gone up and our businesses have grown. And what I'm hearing from you is that our businesses have grown and maybe we haven't always learned our leadership skills as the business grew. We grew it the old fashioned way, and now we need to figure out how to maintain it, keep it moving forward, and transition it. And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a saying that's definitely used a lot today, but, working in the business versus working on the business. And so many people today, like my dad was one of them. My granddad trained my dad as an employee. So even if the operation still existed today, Karen, which it wouldn't have, I can just tell you it wouldn't have, simply because my granddad did not take any of his kids through the proper journey to build them into strong, high-level business owners, right? And that's a mindset, again, that's developed through experiences. It cannot be taught. And so even if our operation, if it didn't go under an 05, I'm confident it wouldn't be running today simply because those mindsets and skill sets and the way they think about business, those things were not transitioned right appropriately. And so thinking about to your kids and passed on that operation successfully, you have to take them through that journey. And the more you try to protect them or save them from any hardship or any adversity, you are just robbing them of God's growth that he had planned for them in their life. And that's a tough thing, especially as a parent. That's a tough thing. And that's why mixing family and business, it doesn't always work very well together.
It doesn't. It's really hard. If anybody out there thinks it's easy, it's not. And, I always tell farmers when I'm talking to them and when they come to me because they just are emotionally drained, I like to tell them, you have this great calling to make food for the world, to make food for your community, for your family, to take care of the land. I mean, these are tremendous callings and a heavy pressure, and they do it and they work so hard. But I tell them the harder they work, sometimes that's a coping mechanism
Oh, if
for
I'm
not dealing with what's going inside, is just to
it's
keep working harder.
it's their way of sedating, right? And honestly, it's the best way. If they just want to work hard and that's their form of sedation, that's great, because the number of customers that we've had come in over the years that were alcoholics or drug addicts, all this type of stuff here that is happening in the industry that people do not want to talk about, but we know it's happening, and it's even worse. This year with the number of farm bankruptcies that are happening, the debt load that people are dealing with. Yeah. So these things, you have to figure out where you're at financially here to kill those stories, get rid of that scarcity and those fearful emotions, so you can have a plan going forward. But also too, one point I wanted to make sure I hit on was that getting the number structured and organized, like in our system and everything, now it creates this level playing field for you to start bringing the kids into the financial conversation. Right? All the numbers are there. They're laid out. They're on one level playing field versus, oh, well, your dad just knows all that stuff, so you just ask him and he'll tell you. That's not a way to pass on the operation, right? So that's another important point there that I wanted to call out.
Right. And I think that I'm hearing that really important message from you, and not having that conversation when you're walking down the field road or you're walking through the barn, like having a time and a structure to have those conversations, to share, here's where the information is, here's the data we need to enter to get to it, like training them,
Yeah,
spending, having them
you,
spend some time.
at the end of the day, everything we're doing with our kids, with our team, with those that we can impact in our life, we're training a specific type of behavior. So that's where it gets really tough. It's like, okay, what type of behavior are you training your kids? Are you training them to be dependent upon mom and dad for the rest of their life? Or are you training them to be leaders and business owners, which means maybe you have to be perceived as the asshole, but to push them down a path that's going to help with their development as an individual and as a business owner.
Right. That is so eye-opening, and I
Yeah.
love that that's how you and your group is really moving forward to tell people about, let's look at our legacy this way. I think that is going to make a big difference for a lot of our family farms out there. And as we wrap up our conversation today, and I know you just reemphasized that one message, but is there a message you really want our listeners, our farm families to hear, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed by transition planning? What would you tell them?
Pick your poison. And the reason I say that is because, so we had our live event back in Omaha, December 5th and 6th. So we had 200 plus of our customers come into that event for those 2 days. And it was actually 2.5 days. So day 3, it was all on legacy and estate planning. Right. So we have all the customers in there. We have all their numbers. We have all their balance sheets. We know where they're at financially there. So I had our team beforehand go through and figure up what was the total amount of assets and then liability sitting in that room. There's 200 farmers, Karen. What do you think total amount of assets was sitting in that one room with us?
Oh my, I think I would even way underestimate. I can't even imagine.
So more than 500 million,
Wow.
because there's a few of them in there that are big, big operations. And then what do you think total debt load was?
Well, I hope, because you've been working with them, their debt load was it was not that high, but what was their debt load for that group?
So most of the customers that have come in that were in that room have just come in this year as customers there.
Okay.
But overall debt load in there was 250 million or more. Right. So over about 50% debt to asset ratio, which isn't terrible, but
Right.
we want it to be better than that. And that's where we hopefully can working with customers and help them get there. Now, I ended it with, I said, how many of you guys actually have your estate plan set up inside of this room? And when I'm talking estate plan, I'm talking all of your trust set up, your wills, your durable power of attorneys, and a full legacy plan and succession plan on the operation. How many hands do you think went up?
Not very many.
So less than 10% of the room.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was.
these are family operations that have been in this for a long time, right? Generations for most of them. And so the reason I say pick your poison is because in that room, think about just the magnitude of assets that are there that everybody wants them to be transitioned to the next generation, but literally have no game plan in place right now.
Yeah,
You know, so
it's scary, right? Because again, this is food security
yeah,
too for our
absolutely.
country
Mhm. Yep.
and fuel and lots of other things.
Well,
So,
again, just the family legacy, right? And so, are you setting your kids up for failure because you're unwilling to go through what is required today, which means being a leader and being perceived as maybe not the nicest person, to make sure that you actually have a transition plan set up for the next generation? Or are you going to let, and this is exactly what I hit on at the event too. I said, okay, great. So we roughly have $400 million in assets in this room that will go through probate when you guys die. Become public knowledge to everybody. The court's going to decide which one of your kids gets what assets. I said, how many of you guys think your operation is going to be successful after that happens? Nobody raised their hand.
right.
You know. So, anyways, that's why I say pick your poison.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate you joining Rural Realities today, sharing your story, and for all the work you do to support farm families, especially during some challenging seasons in their life. How do people get a hold of you? Where can they find out more information?
Yeah, so very simply, just go to legacyfarmer.com. You'll have all my socials right there. You'll have information about our program and how we help farm families across the country and in Canada now. And yeah, that's the best place to get a hold of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining today. And I hope all of you take a little bit away or just even start to think about legacy a little bit differently so that we can continue to move our family farms forward into the future.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Gary.
you, Jace.
The Wisconsin Farm Center with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection provides a variety of services to farmers and farm families across Wisconsin, including financial consulting, transition planning, conflict mediation, veterinary diagnostic analysis, a farmer wellness program, and more. For additional info, you can call the Wisconsin Farm Center toll-free at 1-800-942-2474 or email them farmcenter@wisconsin.gov. Also, the website address is datcp.wi.gov. Also, if you're experiencing depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, or just need a welcoming ear to talk to, call the free and confidential 24/7 Wisconsin Farmer Wellness Helpline at 888-901-2558 to talk with a stress counselor anytime. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Rural Realities Podcast.